The jungle breathes in the pre-dawn darkness. Mist clings to the canopy like wet cotton. A young woman crouches behind a fallen log, her bare feet silent on the moss. An AK-47 is slung diagonally across her chest. She's maybe 19. Her name is irrelevant to this story. What matters is her job. She listens, not for sound, but for the absence of it. The birds have stopped calling. The insects have gone quiet. Something is wrong. A twig snaps 40 meters to her left. She freezes, every muscle locked, her breathing shallow. She scans the foliage, the shadows between the trees, the spaces where light doesn't reach. She sees nothing. But she knows only one unit in Vietnam could move this quietly through jungle this thick. Not the Americans with their radios crackling and their boots thudding. Not the South Vietnamese with their cigarette smoke trailing behind them. It's the Australians, the SAS. Among the Viet Cong infrastructure, there existed a network most Western audiences never knew about. Young women, some barely out of childhood, stationed at strategic points throughout Phuoc Tuy province and beyond. They weren't combatants in the traditional sense. They were the eyes and ears of the revolution. These female lookouts ranged from 14 to 25 years old. They received training that would surprise anyone who dismissed them as mere sentries. They learned to read the jungle like a text. A broken branch meant someone passed within the last 3 hours. Footprint depth indicated weight and equipment load. The direction of disturbed leaves showed which way a patrol was heading. They memorized the patrol patterns of every Allied unit in their sector. Americans moved in squad strength, made noise, took breaks. South Vietnamese units smoked, talked, moved predictably. The Australians were different. Each lookout carried a small kit. A whistle, sometimes a radio, always grenades. 2 grenades typically, one for the enemy, one for herself if capture seemed inevitable. Their positions were carefully selected. Natural choke points, trail junctions, water sources. They sat alone for 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours at a stretch. Their instructions were simple and brutal. Detect the enemy. Signal silently if possible. Die silently if necessary. Do not compromise the location of the main force. The life expectancy of a female lookout in 1966 was roughly 4 months. Quote. A veteran recalled. Quote. 1. The Viet Cong understood something fundamental about warfare. Information travels faster than bullets. A lookout who spotted a patrol and lived to report it could save an entire company. A lookout who died without raising the alarm was a failure, regardless of her courage. This created a psychological pressure that Western soldiers rarely experienced. These young women knew they were expendable, and they did it anyway. Day after day, sitting in the wet darkness, waiting for ghosts. And then, the Australian SAS arrived. The Special Air Service Regiment had a reputation before they even set foot in Vietnam. Formed from the lessons of jungle warfare in Malaya and Borneo, they operated differently. 4 to 6 men. Long-range patrols lasting up to 10 days. Minimal equipment, maximum stealth. They moved slower than any other Allied unit. This confused the Viet Cong at first. An SAS patrol might advance 300 meters in an hour. They stopped constantly. They listened. They smelled the air. An SAS trooper explained. They carried their weapons differently. No rattling slings, everything taped down. They wore soft hats instead of helmets and blackened their faces. They used a quote 4, freezing in place for minutes at a time. The point man used the quote 5, focusing on one small area for a full 5 seconds to force the eye to see details. Within 6 months, the Viet Cong had a name for them. Ma Rung, jungle ghosts. Quote. 6. Intelligence reports noted. For the female lookouts, this created a new kind of terror. Their job depended on detection, but the Australians were different. Stories circulated among the lookout network. One patrol passed within 5 meters of a lookout. She never saw them, only found their boot prints later. Another lookout reported quote 7 but feeling a presence. Her commanders dismissed her. 2 hours later, artillery struck a nearby base. A third lookout was found dead of a heart attack at 17. Her diary described nightmares about men who walked without sound. This wasn't propaganda. This was terror. April 1967. Phuoc Toi Province. The wet season turned the jungle into a steam bath. A 6-man SAS patrol inserted by helicopter at last light. The patrol commander was a corporal, 23 years old. His point man was 21, a master tracker from Queensland. Their mission: long-range reconnaissance of a suspected supply route in the Maytao Mountains. Find it, observe it, report it. Do not engage. At dawn, they moved. The ground was soft, muddy, treacherous. Every step had to be tested. They moved in single file, 5 meters apart. It's the most boring, exhausting, terrifying thing you'll ever do. Moving at half a kilometer an hour, testing the ground, checking for tripwires, smelling the air for fish sauce or cigarettes. At 0800 hours, the point man raised his fist. He'd spotted a game trail, 3 meters wide, too wide for animals, human traffic. The corporal moved forward. The trail showed use, maybe 2 days old. Bootprints heading northeast, at least a dozen men. They decided to parallel the trail, staying 30 meters to the side. The environment pressed in. Leeches dropped from leaves. You couldn't swat them. Movement drew attention. You burned them off later. Heat soaked their uniforms. Water was rationed to avoid the sound of sloshing canteens. By 1000 hours, they had moved another 400 meters. That's when the point man froze again. This time, he didn't raise his fist. He simply stopped, like someone pressed pause on a film. The others froze too. For 90 seconds, nobody moved. Then the point man lowered himself into a crouch. He had seen something 40 meters ahead, behind a fallen log, a shape too regular, too still. The corporal stared at it. 5 seconds, 10, 15. Then he saw it too. A person, small, crouched low, wearing dark clothing. A lookout. The corporal calculated rapidly. Withdraw, observe, eliminate. He decided to observe. They moved glacially slow into cover and watched. Her name was Huyen. She was 20, a veteran of 9 months. She'd heard the stories about the Australians. That morning, something felt wrong. The jungle was too quiet. The rhythm was off. She listened intently. Nothing. But the feeling persisted. She scanned the vegetation. Nothing. Then she heard it. Not a sound, but an absence of sound. 30 meters to her right, the insect stopped buzzing for a moment. Her heart rate spiked. She reached for her whistle. One blast for possible enemy. She brought it to her lips and stopped. She realized something terrifying. If the Australians were out there, they were already watching her. If she blew the whistle, she'd give away her position definitively. They'd know exactly where she was. If she stayed silent, maybe they'd pass. Maybe they hadn't seen her. She stayed frozen, whistle touching her lips, mind racing. The corporal watched her. She was good, disciplined. He made his own calculation. If she blew that whistle, the area would light up with VC. Mission aborted. If she didn't, they might slip past. He signaled the point man to move left to check for others. It took the point man 12 minutes to move 8 meters. He signaled back, 1 lookout, isolated. The corporal chose to wait. Time means nothing in the jungle. You learn to love waiting. For 90 minutes, neither side moved. Huyen remained frozen. The SAS remained invisible. At 11:45, something changed. Voices, male voices speaking Vietnamese, approaching from the southeast. A VC patrol. This changed everything. If they reached Huyen, she'd signal them. The SAS would be compromised. The corporal had 3 minutes to decide. Withdraw, ambush, or do something counterintuitive. He decided to move closer to Huyen. When enemy forces converge, the safest place is often the gap between them. The patrol moved slowly, angling toward her, staying low. They closed the distance to 20 meters. Huyen was focused on the voices. The SAS slipped past her flank, into a depression in the ground. They were now between Huyen and the approaching VC patrol. The voices grew louder. 8 men, moving casually. Probably logistics. The SAS froze. They were sandwiched between 2 enemy forces. If this went bad, they'd have to fight their way out. The VC patrol appeared. Young men, laughing, not alert. They passed within 15 meters of the SAS. Huyen stood up and waved. One VC saw her and waved back. They diverted toward her. The SAS used that moment. While attention was on Huyen, they moved. Using the cover of the VC's noise, voices, footsteps, they put 30 meters between themselves and the enemy in 45 seconds. Then they froze again. Behind them, they heard conversation. Huyen was explaining her suspicions. The patrol leader sounded skeptical. The corporal heard this and signaled, "Box formation. Move fast." They put 100 meters between them and the enemy, then formed a defensive circle and waited. The waiting is worse than the fighting. Your mind plays tricks. The search behind them intensified. More voices. The VC had called reinforcements. The patrol signaler suggested artillery. The corporal shook his head. Not yet. Movement. Left flank. 60 meters. Figures moving tactically. A hunter-killer team. The corporal understood. Huyen had reported suspicious signs. Now they were being hunted. Search party to the south. Hunter-killer team to the east. He decided to move west toward higher ground. Speed took priority over stealth. They found a small ridge with good observation. They took positions. 5.5 hours until darkness. He keyed the radio. Contact report. Estimated 30 enemy. Request extraction after last light. The VC patrol leader was experienced. He respected the Australians. He saw the signs, broken foliage, a partial boot print, professional, but in a hurry. He signaled his team to slow down. The corporal heard them coming. Not footsteps, subtle disturbances. 8 figures, closing. The VC moved closer, 20 meters. The VC point man stopped, raised his fist. He was staring directly at the ridge. 10 seconds, nobody breathed. Then he lowered his fist. He hadn't seen them. He turned slightly south. The corporal exhaled. 10 seconds later, a bird erupted from the canopy. The VC dropped to prone positions, weapons up, scanning. 15 meters separated them. The corporal could see a young VC soldier. His rifle barrel swept slowly right. If it moved another 10 degrees, he'd see them. It moved 5, 8, and stopped. The VC leader decided it was just a bird. He signaled his team to stand. They moved away. The corporal waited 5 full minutes before relaxing. You never get used to being that close. At 1900 hours, it was fully dark. They moved to a clearing. In the darkness, they heard movement. The VC were still searching. The sound of rotors reached them. The VC heard it too. Shouting. Converging. The helicopter appeared. An Iroquois. Dark against the sky. It descended. The SAS broke cover. Gunfire erupted from the tree line. Muzzle flashes. The door gunner returned fire with his M60. The patrol threw themselves aboard. Quote 11. The chopper lifted, banking hard, rounds pinging off the fuselage. They were away. Inside, 6 men sat in silence. They were alive. Huyen remained at her position. She'd heard the escape. She'd failed. The patrol leader interrogated her. Quote, 12. He told her to stop being paranoid, but she knew. The Australians had been there, watching. 3 months later, Huyen was reassigned to a supply unit due to, quote, 13. Quote, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Her captured diary later revealed the depth of her terror. They walk between raindrops. We cannot hear them, but we know they are there. The intelligence analysis was undeniable. Australian SAS patrols created disproportionate psychological impact. Not through brutality, but through silence. They turned the jungle into a weapon. By 1971, the Australians were withdrawing. Veterans returned to a divided country, but they remembered. They remembered the heat, the fear, and the mateship. And they remembered the enemy. Worthy opponents. Years later, a veteran said, I read about those female lookouts. Part of me felt bad. They were kids. But that's war. We were all kids. They chose their side, we chose ours. We both did our jobs. The SAS established a reputation as one of the world's premier units. The female lookouts were never celebrated, but they played a critical role. The dread they felt wasn't irrational. It was the appropriate response to a superior threat. Dawn in Phuoc Tui. The jungle awakens. A young woman takes position behind a log. She listens, not for sound, but for the absence of it. Because somewhere, maybe kilometers away, maybe meters away, a 6-man patrol is moving. She can't hear them. She can't see them. But she knows they're there.